So, Gazwan, I think this is where I hand over to you to introduce Navil.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's really a great honor for me, a privilege to introduce Navil Sethna, or Professor Sethna. I have to call him Neville because he was a close friend of mine. He was educated in Iraq, and we get together in the same medical school for the 6th year, and we graduated together in 1976. So I know Neville for now more than, well, very, very scary to say that's 50 years. uh, Anyhow, he moved to the United States at one stage, and he's now been in the United States for almost 40 years. He specialized in anesthesia. He became a very prominent anesthesiologist and had a very successful career in medicine, academically as well as clinically. He published extensively, and he has now awarded a significant prize in his field. His specialty is probably now caring for intractable pain in children. That is a kind of a chronic pain that these children are suffering from. Mainly, a lot of them are probably kids with cancer. So that was his specialty. Of course, he is now he's a professor in Harvard University, so he's in prestigious university in Boston. Now, Professor Sethna is a member of Zoroastrian faith. Rarely I have seen him discussing his religion at all, but I believe that he had a great significance to him. I asked him if he can give us a talk, and he was reluctantly agreed. So hopefully that we will share learning more about this ancient tradition, which is probably more than 3,000 years old, but it has directly or indirectly affected all the Abrahamic religion in one way or another. I mean, many of the Jewish sacred books were like Book of Daniel or Pentateuch were actually written with a lot of influence of Zoroastrian religion because it was written during the Babylonian exile, where the Persian are dominant at that time. And even in the Christianity had its effect. After all, we know that the first people who give, other than the shepherd, the Magi, who are but effectively Zoroastrian sage, who came and gave homage to baby Jesus. But even in the early days of Christianity, there was a lot of movement, like the Manichaean heresy, which has effectively dominated the Christian thinking for almost 500 years, were actually a combination of Zoroastrians and Christians' belief. And even people like Augustine of Hippo, the great philosopher who influenced our Western civilization, was a follower of Mani, these Zoroastrians who actually running the Manichaean heresy. And even Islam, after when the Islamic conquest the Persian Empire, there was a lot of influence of Zoroastrians on some of the Islamic tradition. So many of the beliefs of Zoroastrians, like the power of Satans and the power of evil, the angels, hells and paradise, all are mirrored in our Abrahamic religions. So although now Zoroastrian is a small community, I assume it is, I don't know, but Neville can tell us it's about 60,000 people worldwide, but its impact on the human civilization is very, very far-reaching. Even it affected the Buddhism and the Baha'is faith in one. So obviously it is anthropologically a very important phenomenon that we tend to forget about it, and it is important in the faith of billions of people nowadays. So obviously we need to learn about it, and I'm very, very enthusiastic to learn more about it and to hear about something from Professor Sethna. So Navil, it's all yours now. Over.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction, Rizwan. And thank you, Lynn, for inviting me. Good evening, everyone. So as Rizwan said, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the Zoroastrianism. And I want to just mention that I don't have any conflict in giving this talk, but I do have few disclaimers that I'm not expert in Zoroastrianism, but I was brought up following the basic tenets of this religion. And so my presentation is primarily based on reviewing the literature, commonly accepted knowledge by scholars, historians in this religion and the Persian history. So as you all know, that there are many challenges when goes back to the history. And most of what I'm going to present is what has been found in texts, in historic sites, records, and artifacts. My presentation is really based on several scholars and primarily Professor Mary Boyce, who was expert in the Zoroastrianism, not only religion, but also the Zoroastrian community in 1800 and 1900 in India. So she was a British scholar in Iranian languages and authority on the Zoroastrianism. She was a recipient of Royal Asiatic Society, Burden Medal, and Sykes Medal of the Royal Society of Asian Affairs. She has written 27 books on this topic. And the Royal Asiatic Society has established an annual Voice Award in her name. And another influential historian and expert in this field was Delphine Minot. She was a French-born, became later ethnologist. She was a daughter of a famous expert or historian in Assyriologist, and he also had interest in Zoroastrianism. So she took interest in this religion. And in fact, she lived in India among the Zoroastrian community there to learn more about them. And she was also influential to Mary Boyce. And in fact, Mary Boyce had dedicated one of her books to Miss Minot. Unfortunately, her writing was not, or her book was not read widely because it was written in French until late 1800 when it was translated into one of the Indian languages and then into English. She also was considered to be an authority in this religion, and she had received high awards from the Academy of France and the Ministry of what they used to call it public instruction. So both of them were considered to be expert on the Zoroastrian community in India, and they collected first-hand accounts from the Zoroastrian community there. Now, another influential historian is Han Yarshadr. He was an Iranian-born historian. He was a linguist and a poet. And he was one of the first Iranian professor in the United States after the Second World War. He also wrote a famous book on the Zoroastrianism. And I won't go into details in terms of his accomplishment, but he was a well-known historian in the United States and around the world, and he had received the UNESCO award for his contribution to Iranian history and particularly the Zoroastrian religion. So what I would like to do, which I do when I present any kind of medical topics, is to start with the present and go back to the roots. So in 1900, Russian archaeologists working in Turkmenistan, they found Bronze Age relics, and they believed that it was one of the earliest Zoroastrian fire temple. And that dates to 2nd millennium BC. And this findings or this discovery really aligns with what, or the discoveries of Doctors Boyce, Yarshas, and Minot. In 2018, there was a site where it tracks the origin of religions and faiths and so on. Shows here the time when the 2nd millennium BC, when the Zoroastrian religion started. And if we can just zoom on that era, you can see the Zoroastrianism influenced or shaped many of the, as Ghazwan said, the Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. At the same time, or just before that, Antinism had started. And this is interesting because I'll tell you why. It was started by one of the pharaohs in Egypt, and he started Antinism, and Antin means son, and he was known as a controversial ruler, and he was married to one of the most beautiful women in the world in those days, Nefertiti, which we all know, who started the art in the Asian culture. Anyway, so he started what we call monolatrism, and that is defined as that you can follow multiple idols or deity, but there's only one supreme god or deity, and that was the sun. And the historians think that he did that is to stifle the entrenched power and corruption among the influential priesthoods, bureaucracy, and nobilism or nobles. Something probably you guys can relate, but in my neck of the wood, we call them organized political religions, officials, government officials, and the elite. So things have not changed since then. Anyway, so that was one of the earliest notion of thinking about one supreme god or deity. Now, the basic tenets of Zoroastrianism is that it is believed, first of all, that it is the first monotheistic religion, believes God as a spirit, and he's the supreme being, creator, and the principal object of faith. The Zoroastrianism flourished for many centuries during the great empires of Persia. And probably you guys can recognize Cyrus the Great, which was one of the golden years of the Persian Empire. So this religion believes that there is a major battle between good and evil. The god of wisdom and light, termed as Ahura Mazda, means Lord of Wisdom, and he's viewed as immortal spirit, and is the creator of deity and the god of sky. The evil is, term is used here, is not a god, but is an evil and destructive spirit that crawled into the world. So, according to the historians, that just to give you a little background about the prophet himself, that Zoroaster exhibited exceptional wisdom and intellect early in his life. And he was very pious, contemplative child, deeply interested in nature and universe and the purpose of life. And he was studying to be a priest. And at age 30, he received revelation at the bank of a river. And that was a shining light, which later described here as an angel, while fetching water at dawn for the sacred ritual, which is a prayer. And interestingly, that the Zoroastrians still follow this practice. In other words, they pray at dawn before drinking or eating anything. So the shining figure was named as Good Spirit or Angel, as here depicted in the relics. And the angels led the prophet to the presence of the God of wisdom, where he was taught the cardinal principles of good religion, which was named after him. And as a result of this vision, Zoroaster felt that he was chosen to spread and preach the religion. So the unique features of this religion, as I mentioned, it is monotheism. It is also messianic in terms of believing free will and judgment after death. And so they believe in heaven, hell, angels, demons, and so on, that, as Ghazwan said, influenced other religions, particularly the three Abrahamic religions and other philosophical systems. The other features of it is that the supreme God or the Lord of wisdom will ultimately prevail over the evil spirit, at which point reality will undergo a cosmic renovation. And this term means restoration at the end of time, making it to initial state. And the doctrine also believed that renovation of the universe is when evil will be destroyed and everything else will be perfect unity with God. The other doctrinal premises are that the salvation for the individual depended on sum total of individuals' thoughts, words, and deeds, and there could be no intervention, that is to say, whether compassionate or capricious, by any divine being to alter this. In other words, you seal your fate with your thoughts, words, and deeds in this world, and that each human bears responsibility for his or her own soul, and of course, simultaneously share the responsibility with the world's fate. So the religious textbook of Zoroastrianism is called Avesta, and this is named after the Avestan society in which the religion started. And the scripture discusses the beliefs, ritual practices, and the laws, the ethical conducts, spiritual aspiration, and so on and so forth. And as you read the history books, you may see different variation of Zoroastrianism as Avestian people or Mazdian. Avestian is named after their holy book, and Mazdian after the name of the Almighty God. Now, this religion really flourished for many centuries in Iran during the great Persian empires. And one of the great king of one of these empires was Cyrus the Great, who you all know really freed the Jews from Babylon. He was a tolerant ruler, and he believed in one of the major law of Asha, means truth and righteousness, and he did not impose Zoroastrianism on the people of Persia or the territories he conquered. So even to date, well, I don't know much about Iran to date, but for centuries, and the Iranian Jews were practicing Judaism even in the presence of the Islamic country. So it flourished, and it also spread in Central Asia along the Silk Road from China to Middle East and to Europe. Now, Zoroastrianism started to dwindle and fade after the conquer of Muslims of Iran. This was around 630 AD. And that led to the fall of the last Persian Empire and decline of this religion in Iran, and because of the conversion to Islam and persecution. Now, a small group of Zoroastrians fled Iran or Persia and sailed from Persian Gulf into Arabian Sea. And one group ended in the west coast of then India, now it's Pakistan, which is Karachi. And this is where actually my father's ancestors landed. And the other group landed in the western state of India called Gujarat. And this is where my mother's ancestors landed. Anyway, this all happened between 700 and 900 AD. And when they landed in India, they were called Parsis. And what it meant is Persian people. So this is the 19th century Indian Zoroaster figure, which was taken from the 4th century AD relic in Iran. and this is the prophet who's supporting the great king, or one of the great kings, who's receiving this honor from the Lord of Wisdom. And you can see in Zoroastrian symbolism, there's a lot of these rings, and the rings really symbolizes the authority, power, and leadership. The other symbol is the fire, and you see it in Zoroastrian temples, and that's why they're named as fire temples. But Zoroastrians do not worship fire. Most of the worship is done at home. And the fire, the reason for the fire is that it symbolized the Lord of Wisdom and light and purification. So some of these fire temples are still active, and this one is actually in Yezd, in middle of Iran. And Yezd used to be the capital of the great empires of Persia. And it's still active, and there are a lot of Zoroastrians who live there. And this one is in New York, this one is London, and this one is in Toronto. And you can see the fire is always there 24/7, symbolizing the old Zoroastrian tradition. The other thing which is very unique about Zoroastrians, that they left their dead bodies on the top of the mountain. And this is a really one of the oldest, from 2nd millennium BC, still standing in Iran, in Yezd. Of course, it's not, this practice has been banned by the Muslim in 1930s. It's still active in Bombay, by the way. But in general, the Parsis now in India or elsewhere, they cremate their dead. There are still small group of Orthodox Parsis who do not like that idea, because they consider the fire sacred and should not be contaminated by corpse. So the Zoroastrian holy book. I'm going to go over a few of those texts. So one of the major texts is that an absolute end of time in history, the annihilation of evil, a general resurrection of the dead, with a general last judgment, and God's kingdom will be established here on earth forever. And this text had 17 Avestan hymns, which is believed to be composed by the prophet himself. And there are other prayers that are supposed to be a part of the public worship. And these are recited, but not sung. The other important part of the text is that life is a battle between good and evil. And for a human, it is a choice between truth and lies. And that the Almighty God is one powerful God, created the earth and angels, and the devil crawled into the world and tried to destroy it. So for humans, they can defeat the devil with good thoughts, those questioning, seeking knowledge, find the truth, speak the good words, and apply or act on good deeds. So these are very important principles of the Zoroastrian faith. And so individuals have free will to make their decision wrong or right, to eliminate their life and the world, to counteract evil. So these Zoroastrian principles are actually can be considered as basis for the modern psychotherapy. So as I mentioned, the good deeds, good words, good deeds, is that in Zoroastrianism, irrespective of life events, one has to have good thoughts and beliefs, positive emotion and feelings, which then can lead to rational behavior and good action. And this is really what the cognitive behavioral therapy in modern psychology teaches. All right, and so some of the other content of the Holy Book says that after death, the spirit will go with good deeds, goes to eternal heaven, the paradise. And this word paradise is derived from the Persian word paradish, and lives in eternal bliss. So the Greek modified this word to paradisios and then into English, the paradise. The battle will continue for thousands of years until the Savior is born from a virgin mother to defeat the evil or the devil. And this is explicitly mentioned in the early verses of the Zoroastrian Holy Book. These are a few quotes from the book, or the Holy Book, is that Zoroastrian path of truth, wisdom, and good, and justice, and so on, that understand the right from wrong, good thoughts, words, and deeds. Happiness comes to those who bring happiness to others, and avoid causing harm to any living being, and that included animals and vegetations. And this is a direct quote from one of the verses: do not do unto others whatever is injurious to yourself. And then living in harmony with nature and peaceful existence with others, discourages wastefulness and cruelty, particularly to other humans and animals. And again, a major principle of the faith is kindness, charity, and helping others. And it's considered to be a major act of faith. And for that reason, you will read about Zoroastrian philanthropy around the world. So unfortunately, this era of Zoroastrianism came to to, or it was the beginning of the end when Alexander the Great conquered Persia and burned down the capital, Persepolis, and burned all the writings in the books. And he also destroys all the cities around the capital. And so the Zoroastrians and the Persian Empire moved away from the destruction and moved to a new capital, which was built in Iraq, the current country, Iraq. It's called Ctesiphon, and it was southeast of Baghdad on Tigris River. And it lasted for 800 years until the Muslims conquered and converted the Zoroastrians into Muslims. So here's the ruins of Persepolis. And this is the remnant of that ruin. And this is the capital Ctesiphon in Iraq, which is still there, but the major part of it is destroyed. So the other thing important about the religion, or the Zoroastrian religion, the initiation is called Nav Jod, means new life or new beginning. So all Zoroastrians have to go through this initiation between the ages of 7 and 12. And they go through a ceremony where they pledge a faith is done, and they commit to a life based on good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And this ceremony starts with bathing in holy water and then reciting the pledge of faith, wearing this cotton shirt that they have to wear for the rest of their life, and use this belt, which is either wool or cotton, that you have to wrap it around your waist. And that the purpose of that is to teach children responsibilities about prayer, bathing, cleanliness, and also to pray before meals. And then they have to wrap it after they have taken a shower. And all ceremonies or religious ceremonies, people have to wear or cover their head. So you will see a good number of Parsis, especially in India, they still wear these caps that they look very much like yarmulke, or yarmulke looks like their caps. All right, I'm not going to go into the translation of the Pledge of Faith, but I want to just go through some of the teachings of the Prophet himself. And the teachings are that there is only one God, and he is the omnipresent. The religion is the religion of love, the caste is of humanity, and the language is the language of the heart. Now, a major event, annual event in Zoroastrianism is the New Year. It's called Nowruz, means new year. And according to Professor Mary Boyce, that it seems reasonable to surmise that this New Year is the holiest of them all, with deep doctrinal significance. And it was founded by the Prophet himself. And it has a cognitive spirit. And it represents the victory of the spirit of sun, which is a symbol of more glorious victory to come. And this was the hope of the Prophet, offering his followers, presenting the struggle between the good and evil. And I'll come to explain to you how he did it. And so it represents the victory physically, morally, spiritually, and ending in victory for good. So the New Year is timed with the spring equinox, and that comes from the ancient Iranian solar calendar, which is considered to be the most accurate calendar in use today. And it was really based scientifically on astronomical calculation. So it has no intrinsic error. The Egyptians and the Babylonians also used similar calendar. And so the ceremony starts 5 days or 6 days, 5 days before the day of the equinox, which is 20th of March. And so 5 days of prayer. On the 6th day, the New Year starts, and it has historical significance. So the old calendar, the Persian calendar, was 12 months and 30 days each month, and each day had a name. The Babylonian also, their New Year started on the first day of spring. And so the Persian and the Egyptian calendar were based on solar calendars, so there was 360 days. But the Zoroastrian added 5 days of prayers before the day of the equinox. So their calendar changed from 360 to 365 days a year, which was based on knowledge of astrology. The only thing they didn't figure out is the leap year. All right, so the purpose and the significance of this with ceremony was that, again, based on many historians, including Dr. Boyce, that this is likely to have been a way of teaching to which Zoroaster naturally resorted, preaching as he did to ancient, non-literate, pastoral people of a Western community or society, where they didn't use images to sustain belief. And so the spring equinox, which is March 20th, represented a time of renewal, fertility, rebirth in agricultural society, and is still actually being practiced in many countries. So the ceremony is for 13 days, and during that, there are 7 dishes that they have to prepare. And these dishes have spiritual significance. So, for example, the wheat and lentil sprout symbolize rebirth and rejuvenation. Dry fruit symbolizes love. Garlic symbolizes healing power. The apple symbolizes beauty, health, and earth. And I'm not sure that they knew that Earth was a round planet, but that's what the history says. They also use the sumac, which is crushed sour crimson berries, which symbolizes sunrise, and germinated wheat symbolizes affluence. And vinegar symbolized ripeness, longevity, and also perseverance. Now, according to the prophet himself, that a celebration with religious rite is a recurrent reminder that the new day will eventually bring everlasting bliss. So that was kind of giving hope to his followers. And this is how the table looks on the day of festivities. So this celebration of Nowruz still ongoing. Surprisingly, that it is considered to be a public holiday and a new year in Islamic Iran still. And Iraq, particularly north of Iraq, the Kurds still celebrate that. And of course, the Central Asia, which was part of the Persian Empire. And you can see many other countries, Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, India, Pakistan, still some of the communities celebrate the Nowruz. Now, lastly, I'm going to talk about Magi, because this has another significance in the history of mankind, is that Magi are Persians of learned and priestly class, and as portrayed in the Bible. And they were called the Magush, means in Persian, Old Persian language, which means magician. So they were very knowledgeable in astrology And people didn't understand that how would they know all this, so they used to call them magicians. So these are skilled astrologers viewed as magicians, and then in Latin they were termed as magi, or and in Greek magus. So in Christian history, the wise men, according to the Gospel of Matthew, came from the east to Jerusalem to homage to the newborn Christ, were related to Magian. So they came from Persia. Now, Zoroaster had predicted 2 millennium earlier that a savior will be born to a virgin mother. Now, the historians and the Bible do not tell us how God revealed to the Magi to know that the King of the Jews had been born. Only that he gave them a sign of his star. And according to history books, that these Magi followed the star and arrived at the right time in the right place to do homage to the newborn Christ. So with that, I think this is my last slide. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be glad to answer any question if I know the answer.
Thank you. That was tremendous. I'm sure that many of us have got questions, and if you're happy to respond to those. Just one. Is it possible to go back to gallery view?
Yeah. Can you stop sharing your screen, Navil, please? If you go to the stop sharing in the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, there it is.
Thank you.
That's great. And then we can take some questions. Dot, you've got your hand up first.
Well, it was a wonderful talk. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much, Navil. One of the rules is to avoid causing harm to any living animals. And I wanted to ask, are people strict vegans or just vegetarians?
So some of the Orthodox Zoroastrians are actually vegan.
Yeah.
But when the Zoroastrians moved from Persia to India, they start to mix with other cultures. And so then they became more liberal, less followers of the strict rules of the religion. But you're right. So according to the scripture, if you want to follow it literally, then you should be vegetarian and not to harm the animals.
Yeah, so most of them don't eat any meat.
That's correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a Parsi friend, but I didn't know Parsis were Zoroastrians. So I've learned something today. Thank you.
Arthur?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Baha'i faith, which began in Persia, we celebrate our New Year starting on the spring equinox, and we still call it Nowruz.
That's correct. Yeah. Actually, when I was growing up in Iraq, when we were in, I believe we were we were ending our elementary school, and it used to be a holiday, public holiday, and we used to go on a field trip to the rural areas and help the farmers to plant trees and vegetations. And it used to be a real spring. Now we don't see the spring with the changes in the environment, but that was it had a more spiritual meaning than religious meaning. So many faiths followed that.
Can I the table looked magnificent for the festival. How much is of Zoroastrian practice is home-based and how much temple-based?
Most of it is home-based. The temple, you just go pray and you're done. But all the festivities occur in the community. Families, friends get together, and cooking is a big thing. And so most of also the prayers occur at home. You're not obligated to go to the temple like every Sunday, although some of the strict Zoroastrians do that. They go to temple every Sunday, but most Zoroastrians pray at home.
Julia?
I was just wondering what role, if any, does fire play in that? I understood about fire in the temple, but is it used in regular worship?
No. So some of the Parsis have candles at home. So when they pray, they put the candle on. But they don't have like a fire as a symbol of center of your prayers. Even when you have the initiation ceremony, there's no fire there. The initiation takes place in a hall, and first you go and pray and then come and do or be involved in the initiation practice, but it's not always the center of the fire, of the worship. And you don't worship the fire itself.
No.
There is nothing in the scripture that says any homage to fire or anything like that. It symbolizes, actually, some of the things that I didn't know about as I was investigating. I found that in some of Dr. Mary Boyce's books, that she has some of the information from the Zoroastrian history that they went into details describing the paradise and the judgment day. And in fact, it's described as your journey in life is a bridge that goes over the hell, and the hell is a fire. So that is how it's described. Now, I trust Dr. Boyce, who dedicated her life to study this religion. So this is something she found in her research. Mm-hmm. So the fire is not, it just symbolizes purity. And because the Prophet Zoroaster, his first vision was light. So they used the fire as a light. And since he was enlightened by the angels, they considered it as a symbol, or they named the Lord of Wisdom as Lord of Wisdom and Light. And they used the fire as a metaphor for light. In those days, they didn't have lights except the fire.
Thank you.
Doreen, and then Gazwan.
Is anything known about the origins of the Holy Book?
So, according to the historian, that it was written by Zoroaster, and he knew how to read and write because he was studying to be a priest, but most of his followers were not literate. And he wrote almost everything that's in that book is written by him.
Okay, it's me. Navil, thank you very much. Can you tell us about the demography of the Zoroastrian people today? I mean, I know there is a big community, very affluent community in China, in India, the Parsi, but I assume, like yourself, have been scattered all over the place. So what is the populations now who claim to be Zoroastrians, and where are they distributed on this earth?
Yeah. So Zoroastrians are endangered species now. There are only several thousands. I don't know exactly the numbers. I've seen some numbers, but I'm not sure whether that represents the population around the world. But the Zoroastrians used to be the largest population in India, and now is dwindling there. And the largest population of Zoroastrians after India, which is mostly in Bombay, are in Toronto in Canada, followed by US and then Australia. And there are a few of them scattered around Europe as well.
And they are very influential. I mean, in India, I know that they had a lot of charitable work. I mean, and very, very wealthy people as well in India. I mean, people. I mean, I know that there are, you know, army leaders, generals, theoretical physicists, and industrialists. Something like Tata, who was very well known, and they have a lot of schools as well. So is that the same thing? That is in India. Is that the same thing elsewhere? I mean, you are in the United States. How many around you, you know, in general?
So there are a lot of Parsis here too. So I know a couple of professors at Harvard Medical School, at MIT, and I don't mix with all the community because, as you said, we are so scattered. The largest community in the United States is actually in New York. And they do have a fire temple there. So there's a fire temple, one in New York, one in Toronto, but not in Boston. Most of the, and you're right, the charity and philanthropy is a big thing in Parsi community, and they considered that the wealth that they accumulate doesn't belong to them. And so they give it away. Last week, actually, one of the Parsi industrialists, Mr. Poonawalla, who started the largest serum industry in India, and he has been giving away all the serum to around the world to develop vaccine. And he was honored last week at MIT for his charitable work. But as you said, when the other thing, the reason for dwindling the Parsis actually because the largest community was in India. But when this is now stories that I heard, and probably is true from my parents, is that when the Parsis arrived in India, they didn't speak the Indian languages. And the kings in those days did not want them to land there in India. And the story goes, now it could be anecdote, but is that since they couldn't communicate by language, the Indian king brought a big dish and filled it with the milk and said, "We are full, so you're not welcome here." And the Parsi priest, he took sugar and put it in the milk and stirred it without spilling it. and then they got accepted. But the conditions were that they have to assimilate with the culture there. So they changed their attire. So the Parsis don't wear any more Persian attires. And the second thing is that they can keep their religion, which they did. But one of the conditions was that the Parsis cannot convert the Hindus into Parsiism. So that was one of the conditions. So the Parsis started to, their population started to decrease because they can only marry within their community. which was not a very good idea because then many of the genetic diseases started to increase in this community. And finally, as the Parsi generation started to get educated, they avoided marrying within close Parsi because they were all related when they came together, you know, the families. And so that's one of the reasons why the population is going down. But as you said, they were very influential in India and very respected even to date. So the Indira Gandhi's husband was a Parsi. As you said, Tata is Parsi. The biggest cancer institute in Bombay is also is by Parsi and free care. They build huge schools and all donated to, and hospitals. They're still named after Parsis, but they're donated to the government for free care. And they were the first to start the Air India, which is the major airline in India. And the Tata industry and many of the other industries in India. And a lot of scholars, a lot of, so about 5 years ago, and they're very respected, by the way, 5 years ago, there was a major dispute during the Modi government. And they took the dispute to the High Court. And there was a lot of controversy about it. So finally, a committee got together and asked one of the Parsi High Court judge who was retired to come and kind of resolve the issue. But also, as you said, high command in military was Parsi. The minister of the ministry in India was Parsi, and many others. And as you probably know, Zubin Mehta, who was the Meister of, I think it was in New York and in Israel. And so there are many of them, including one of the actresses actually in Star Trek. I don't know if you guys remember from the 70s, the actress who was completely bald, and she was also Parsi from Canada. So they are very industrious. They believe in, because they follow the scripture of knowledge that will lead you to truth. So they are very obsessive compulsive of having their kids going to school and get educated, even today.
Professor Sethna, I want to include Hannah, who had her hand up before, and then Mike Walling. So can we just take 2 quite short questions, because I'm aware that time is running out for us. Hannah?
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Neville, for your talk. I learned so much. So my father is Iranian, actually. In his family, they've been Baha'is for 4 or 5 generations, but previous to that, Muslim, I think. And so I know things about, our family. I've never been to Iran because the Baha'i community is heavily persecuted there, but I don't know so much about the Zoroastrian, roots of all of the traditions, the Iranian traditions. So things like the Haftzin and the Sofre, and it's really nice to know to understand that now. Thank you. I was wondering, is the Zoroastrian community in Iran persecuted as a religious minority currently?
Surprisingly not. But after the revolution, until the revolution, they were very much protected, but they're less protected now since the Khomeini revolution. But they're still there, and the people protects them. And I heard recently that one of the member in the parliament is of Parsi origin, and so far, they haven't destroyed the temple in Yazd, and people are still allowed to go and pray there. So in some way, they're protected by the people. And definitely, so I have an uncle who, his family's still in Tehran. But when the revolution started, they sent all their kids out of Iran and they migrated to Canada. But they're not free. They're allowed to practice and live within their community, but they cannot be equal to the Muslims, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes,
Mike, you are muted.
You're muted.
Mike, you are muted.
Sorry, I didn't hear my name being called. Some 20 years ago, when we were in Hong Kong, the Zoroastrians were a highly respected minority with several hospitals endowed by them. That's all, not a question.
Lynn, can I just to say one word, ask Neville. I know that the vultures story, which is very important for the funeral practice, it's dwelling now in the whole world. I mean, there is very less vultures because of the chemical things. So how they resolve the problem of funerals?
So like, many other religions, there are reformed Parsis who use common sense. And so most Parsis now cremate their dead, or they elect to have them buried. So many of my family members are buried, one in Christian and one in Muslim cemetery. So the Christians always welcome Parsis for burial in Christian cemetery, including here in the United States.
Juliet, you had your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Are there any temples in England, Zoroastrian temples? And if, and secondly, how can you access an experience of Zoroastrian community or worship?
So I'm not familiar with England, but Zoroastrians are also, I would say that the priestly group are very orthodox, and they don't allow non-Zoroastrians to come into their temple.
Oh.
I don't know the situation in London, or I know in Canada they're more liberal. I mean, I have a couple of sisters there, and their friends would go with them, and they enter the temple because but it depends on where it is. But I'm not aware, or I don't have any knowledge about the temple in London, whether they allow or not.
Yeah, there's I think Mike Steigel, but there is a large Zoroastrian temple in northwest London, and it was a cinema. With quite amazing Art Deco work. It really is very beautiful. And I don't know if this is true for you, Mike, but a group of us who were involved in religious education were
I was there too.
Invited to the temple, and they did allow us to see the fire ceremony on that occasion. But I don't think that is general. Is that the impression that you got, Mike?
That's the impression I got, that we were invited because the Zoroastrian community were part of the RE community, the RE sort of council as well. So it was part of hosting the RE councils, but also giving us the opportunity to experience the temple.
Yeah. So Dot had her hand up, and then Mike Walling again, if we've still got moments.
Yes.
I was just going to say, Neville, but when you outlined the the set rules of Zoroastrian, one God and one human race, and I really like that because there's no room for discrimination. And I thought what a lovely, peaceful religion when they're just looking at one human race.
Which is interesting because as I was researching for this presentation, and I was looking at conversion into the Zoroastrianism, whether it is allowed or not. And I found out that there are several communities in Sweden are now following Zoroastrianism for reasons you just mentioned, or one of the reasons.
Interesting.
That it is more kind of inclusive,
Yeah.
and it, as you said, it doesn't discriminate you as a race or gender, but as a follower of the one God.
Yeah. Thank you.
And have we got time for Mike? A quick question here. Mike Walling.
Again, not a question, just to say that in the early years of Candifa, there was a Zoroastrian exhibition at SOAS, School of African and Oriental Studies, and we went as we paid a trip there. It was really very interesting. There was a reconstruction of the Temple of Fire, and we learned a great deal from about Zoroastrian from that visit.
Yeah.
So I should say there are the Reformed Zoroastrians, and so for example, I'm not welcomed by the Orthodox Zoroastrians because I don't wear that undershirt and I don't use that belt that the Jews now use it. Have you seen the Orthodox Jews? I think yeah, it was taken probably, I don't know, but anyway, so since I don't do that, the Orthodox Zoroastrians would not consider me as a Zoroastrian. So there's a lot of interpretation of the script, and there is the literal interpretation, and there is the Reformed interpretation. One of the things that now the priest who practice, the Zoroastrian priests who practice in Western countries, now they're realizing that we shouldn't be sitting behind the fire, although they wear masks when they do but they were getting chronic lung disease, inhaling all the smoke. So this practice is slowly also being kind of, we don't have to have a big fire, small fire, a symbolic fire, and so on. So it's not healthy. So people are realizing that these rituals shouldn't be followed blindly and strictly without using common sense.
Can I just check with Gazwan, because it's are we going to be cut off? Because I don't want to be cut off. It's okay. So we could take a question from Mike Steigel.
Yes, you can go as much as you like.
Okay, thank you. Mike, sorry.
That's fine, that's fine. It's not really a question. It's many years ago when I was still teaching, 1 year for Interfaith Week, I organised a multi-faith event type of thing for the sixth form. I took the entire sixth form to the British Museum because the British Museum has specific resources and that sort of thing for exploring religion through history and through archaeology and that sort of thing. I happened to have a Zoroastrian student in the sixth form, and I very specifically pointed out to people and gave him, I'd spoken to him before I'd sprung it on him, but I pointed out to other sixth formers that he could take them to see the exhibits that were representing the Zoroastrian tradition and could talk them through it a little bit as well. Which really, really had a massive impact on all of the other students. They really learned something good. But if you go to the British Museum, see if you can get hold of their religion sort of pack, and that you'll get an opportunity to see some really interesting artifacts in the British Museum.
That's right. I've been to the British Museum and I've seen it there. And also I've been to Louvre, and there are some relics there too. The Zoroastrians have the entrance to the temple like there are two bulls with human head and wings, and there are two of them there in Louvre as well.
Julia?
Just to ask, is that the same as the Ishtar Gate, which is in Berlin?
So the Ishtar Gate goes to the Assyrian culture, but also they took it from the Parsis. So if you go north of Iraq, and in fact, actually the museum in Baghdad, which is Ghazwan, I think you may have seen it near the Western Rail Station, the entrance to it, and you can see it on Google if you Google it. They have the entrance, the ark, and all is taken from the Zoroastrian by the Assyrians, and that's where the name Ishtar comes. But it's all, one culture influenced the following cultures and so on.
Just a quickie to follow on from that. Could you remind me of the symbolism of the Zoroastrian symbol of a sort of winged creatures with wings outstretched? What is that, and what?
Yeah. So let me see. Probably I don't have the picture here, but this is also the wings and the face of a man, and that person is holding a ring. And that ring is the symbol of authority given by God and angels to the prophet. So the ring represents as I mentioned earlier, is the authority, power, wisdom, and righteousness. So this kind of and also it represents the continuation of life, because Zoroaster, the prophet, always wanted to give hope to his followers. So the ring represents continuation of life and rebirth.
You see that the subject of angelology, i.e. the study of angels, which is in Christian tradition, always angels had wings, and they are also, according to the Christian tradition, they are the wise people. So they are all being taken from Zoroastrian's heritage in one way or another, and being transferred from one generation to another.
Can I just ask you another question about the Holy Book? What does it contain? Are there narrative passages, or is it poetry?
No, it's not poetry. It's all narrative.
All right.
And basically, I mean, I don't read the Avestan language, but what has been translated is into that it's like an instruction book. Like, this is what the faith is. This is what is expected of you to do on this earth. And these are the consequences of your deeds or misbehavior or whatever. And these are the rites that you have to follow: the initiation into the religion, pledging the faith, and then the other few quotes that I mentioned about how you behave in your society, taking care of your family, the society, the poor, and live in harmony with others, and so on and so forth. The one thing about the Zoroastrian, which is different than Christianity and I don't know about the Judaism, but and different from, I don't know if the Jews believe in heaven and hell or not, but in Islam and in Christianity, there is a forgiveness. But in Zoroastrian, the way it's written is that you seal your faith on this earth, whether you're going to go hell or to heaven.
Oh, blimey. It's a bit judgmental, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so probably in those days, because
blimey, I can't be doing with that.
For that reason, Yeah, because humans are imperfect, so one should not expect to be either evil or good. We're created imperfect. So
Oh dear, much hope there. Oh.
it's scary to read that, right?
Oh dear, I'm a bit worried now. Yeah.
You've lost the convert there now. What is the place of women? May I be? I noticed in your illustrations, you talked about young people. They were all male.
That's correct.
What's the place of women?
So the women are portrayed in this traditional way, like the old culture, that even though it's a male society, but actually women are honored in a way that some of these Zoroastrians believe that if your mother is not Zoroastrian, you cannot enter the faith of Zoroastrian. These are the Orthodox. So the mother decides the lineage, and so if a non-Zoroastrian marries a Zoroastrian woman, she can bring her kids up as Zoroastrian. But a Zoroastrian man, if they marry non-Zoroastrians, usually the temple and the priesthoods will not be involved in initiation of the faith because the mother has to be Zoroastrian.
Now, it has some similarity to the Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
Well, it's the traditional Jewish, and progressive Judaism has moved away from that. But it's very interesting that is the case. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Can I ask you, I mean, this is a question to everybody, especially to Gaia and others. What is the influence on Buddhism?
So Buddhism actually is a philosophy, and they have some of the influences from the Zoroastrianism about living in harmony with nature, living harmony with others, living harmony with animals, and protecting the environment and respecting another humans. And so it's more philosophy that some of it is taken from the Zoroastrianism.
Gaia, do you want to come in on that? Do you recognize some of the things, similarities?
Yes, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, in the Buddhist tradition, we are very respectful of other religions and want to live in peace. I mean, I was going to say also, I actually went to school with some Zoroastrians, although we didn't actually know them as Zoroastrians because we knew them as Parsis. So I had never heard of till I came to England, I had never heard of the word Zoroastrian. So that was news to me. But yes, I mean, we were good school friends and enjoy being with them.
Well, if we've come to the end of questions for the moment, although I sense that if we waited, we could go on for much, much longer. Navil, it's been an absolutely tremendous presentation. Thank you very much. In the early parts of your talk and your explanations, I was thinking, yes, this is very similar to Judaism, to Christianity, but also in some ways to Sikhism, and a link with one of your stories with one of the stories about the guru, one of the gurus. The links were just tremendous. I think you've given us a magnificent presentation there, something that we could go away and think about all the different aspects for a very long time. We're very much indebted to you for taking this on, and also indebted to Gazwan for encouraging you to speak to us. It's also been very enjoyable. So thank you very much indeed for this evening.
Lynn, it was my pleasure. And I thank Azwan for pushing me to go and read more about my own faith, that some of the stuff that I didn't know about. And I always enjoy talking to my colleagues of different faith because I can always learn. And the more you learn, the more you realize that all these religions are really kind of intertwined in many ways. And it's the same, it's just that it evolved at different era of human evolution. And of course, the religion is kind of modified by human culture. So for example, if you take Muslims from Arab countries, which are different than the Muslims that I met in Southeast Asia, because they were influenced by the other religions, by other cultures. But the basic principles are the same. And if everyone follows the same basic principles, I don't think the religion will divide us. In fact, it will unite us.
Thank you. I think that is part of the joys of being part of an interfaith group, where we learn things about ourselves through learning from others. So thank you once again, both to you and to Ghazwan. And thanks to everybody for coming. I think it's been a really enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.